you'll find there's only one race in the Bible. There were not races of people. My personal opinion is that the kingdom of God consists of that one race, called the G race or the grace race, the people who've been graced by the salvation of Jesus Christ. While we're all children of God by birth, we're not all sons and daughters of God. And that comes about by the acceptance of Jesus Christ and acknowledgement of God as our Father.
You have a million things in this society that you might choose to address, but you've chosen to address from your pulpit in front of many this issue of racism. Why is that?
It actually happened 15 years ago, 1998, a little over 15 years ago now. I was at a conference, a missions conference in Alabama, and a young lady walked up to me just as I was leaving. I'd been there for 3 days. It was Saturday morning. I was leaving to come back to Toledo. And she handed me a piece of paper and she said, I want you to read these verses, Revelation chapter 10, verses 8 through 11. And when I was on the plane coming home, I read it, and it said, John went up and took the scroll from the angel's hand, and he was instructed to eat the scroll. It would be sweet in his mouth, but it would be bitter in his stomach.
Yeah.
And he would be given a fresh word of prophecy concerning languages, races, nationalities, and people. Well, I had no clue as to what that meant. I came home that day, September 3rd, 1998, Saturday. Bishop James was having his latter rain conference at Seagate Center, and Dr. Copeland was speaking. So I told my wife, I said, we promised him we'd go down. I don't feel like going down. I don't want to go down. I almost decided not to go down. She said, you have to, you promised. So I went down. We were going to sit in the back. Walked through the back door, and Sister James was standing there. She grabbed us and took us up front and set us right behind the bishop on stage. I had never met Kenneth Copeland. He had never seen me in his life. And he walked out to speak, and he kept pacing back and forth and couldn't get started. And finally, he walked over to where I was and spoke a prophetic word over me, and talked about a harvest that would be greater than my wildest imagination. And I'm sitting in the midst of a mostly African-American congregation of people, and I never put the two events together for 15 years until Trayvon Martin verdict was read on TV on a Saturday.
Okay, and let's talk about that for a moment.
Okay.
Tell me what hearing that verdict did to you.
I had a range of emotions. First of all, I was fearful because I was afraid that there would be riots and anger. And I just had a sickening feeling in my stomach. And I literally said to God, oh God, help us. In my spirit, God have mercy on us. Help us. And the Lord just spoke to me, and he said, I've given you a message. You need to speak it.
So you connected the Trayvon Martin and those feelings that you had
for the first time.
For the first time with an event that happened to you 15 years ago.
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. And you have been since then compelled to do what? You've been talked about as the master of racial reconciliation, the prophet of racial reconciliation, the commander of racial reconciliation.
I'm not worthy of any of that. Okay, first of all, I have an assignment from God. And as always, when God has spoken to me, I believe God speaks to his people. So I believe in my inner spirit. I hear what God is saying to me. I don't hear audible voices. I don't want to make this, so spectacular. It's just a silent voice inside of me. I have a prayer life. I seek the face of God. And I have an assignment. And I've never questioned the assignments of God.
And what's your assignment? What's your assignment?
My assignment is to bring that message that says, just like it says in Revelation chapter 10, a fresh word of prophecy. And that fresh word of prophecy is that the government cannot mandate integration. It cannot mandate racial reconciliation. The government has failed miserably to bring the races together.
You've in fact said that conversation has taken place in all the wrong forums.
All
the
the wrong
conversation
places.
about racism.
The only place for this to take place is in the church. That is the only place.
But it has also been said time and time again that churches are the most segregated place on the planet on a Sunday morning.
Not the church on Strayer.
All right.
Or the church on 53.
All right.
We have been a multi-cultural church for 30 plus years. When I first came here, yes, it was a lily white congregation, and second Sunday I was here, I got up with just a handful of people. We probably had 75 people, and I said, we are not going to look like this forever. And one African-American family joined us, and then a second, and then a third. Some young ladies at that time, her name was Limey Patton, and she came and began to sing in our praise team, and some of her friends followed her, and it opened the door.
And but in so many ways, you find yourself then preaching to the choir, so to speak. So why do you find that so many other churches are, in fact, the most segregated places on Sunday morning?
I do not understand why. You cannot preach the gospel of the kingdom of Jesus Christ and not be inclusive. The Bible was always inclusive. No one was excluded. There were no racial distinctions in the early New Testament church. There were Jews and Gentiles,
right.
And there were angry people and upset people and religious people, you name it. A bunch of different people being brought together under the umbrella of the kingdom. And here's what I think's wrong, Donnie.
What?
Most churches are church-oriented and not kingdom-oriented. Jesus used the word church twice in the Gospels. It's used only 3 times in the Gospels. But 167 times in the New Testament talks about the kingdom of God. And I think church has become a social institution more so than it has a kingdom
Well, so then
institution.
how do you make it relevant for conversations like these? One of my particular concerns is that we used to see the church as the genesis of so many important civil rights issues. You don't see that so much anymore. It was refreshing, actually, to hear someone like you decide to tackle this issue of racism from your pulpit. Why aren't other churches doing that? How do you discuss church and spirituality and not discuss equality, not discuss those things that are so central to what pastors do every day?
Then you must be kingdom-minded. You must see it as God's kingdom. The church is nothing more than the agency of the kingdom. It is the agency through which the kingdom business is taken care of. And in the kingdom of God, there is neither bond nor free. There's neither Jew nor Gentile. He's trying to say to us, there are no divisions of people in my kingdom. And so when you come together, I want you to come together as my kingdom. I want you to come together for me. I want you to represent me.
So is it your thought then that these other churches that are not addressing these issues are actually focused inappropriately?
I think most churches are inwardly focused too much and not outwardly focused, and that might be the reason why more than 90% of the churches in America are plateaued or in decline. Mm-hmm. If we would get outward focused, if we would just see a harvest and not care what the harvest looks like. I really have never gone after any particular group of people. I just go after people. I look for hurting people, wounded people, needy people, people in trouble, because they need Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Racism, would you agree that racism seems to be more apparent now than it has been in the last decade?
I think it is more personified because of 24-hour news, network, internet. It's always out there. It's always in front of us. And let's face it, Donnie, we've always had people in our society who used race for profit. And they still do it today, and it nauseates me to say that.
There's something that you call those folks. I'm going to let you say that.
You really want me to do that?
I really want you to do that. Right here on television in front of the world.
That was a private conversation.
All right. If it was absolutely private, then you don't have to say it.
I think.
But I think it's a powerful.
Yeah, I think the problem we have is that there are people who will prostitute racism for profit, and I referred in our conversation to racial pimps, and I only say that because I do not think that there should be race baiting. I do not think that people should make profit off of racism. Why would we profit off of something that divides us?
You know what I think, though? I certainly do see some of that, but what I see more than that.
Do you see any, don't you see, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but don't you see that when that does happen, those people are on ABC, NBC, CBS, I can't say those names on TV, I'm sorry, but they're on all the network stations, and and what bothers me is that there are multiplied millions of people like myself who are colorblind.
then I have two things in response to that. First of all, yes, I do see those people on TV. But sometimes I think that the role of some folks is just to raise the issue, that's what their talent is raising the issue.
Or stir things up?
To stir things up. And then it's the responsibility of other folks who have bully pulpits to decide what the next steps are. We have had no lack of focus on the implications of racism in this community, in Toledo and Lucas County in Northwest Ohio. The coalition that I know that you work with Pastor Culp on has, in conjunction with the Blade, had a marvelous forum on that. Tim Wise spoke at that forum. But where were the next steps? Where are the people who say, okay, we know that Trayvon Martin, from all appearances, was a racially motivated killing. We know that diversity training is not being effective. We know that education is in grave danger. Black kids, brown kids, when it comes to succeeding in their education, are not doing such a great job at that. Some of it is the racism of the society, of social positioning. Okay, low-income people have a really hard time getting out of that status. What are the next steps, though?
I've tried very desperately to bring even pastors together, and I have some pastoral friends who are working with me in this and bringing people together and gathering together with people of a different. What we said was, if you're going to come to the breakfast, bring someone of a different nationality than you. I hate the use of the word race because I don't think it's an appropriate term. We are human beings. We are people. We have different cultures. We have different nationalities, but we're all people. So I don't like to use the word race, but what I think is the answer, other than rallies, and I'm all for those. I went to the first rally that they had and thought it was a marvelous rally, thought excellent things were said. But Donnie, we must come into the workplace on Monday morning with the same unity that we sit and worship together with on Sunday morning, or Saturday night for that matter, if you have a Saturday night service. We must bring that into every facet of our living. It must be in the schools, it must be in the workplace, it must be everywhere. And it can't be something we start passing laws to mandate, because in reality, if you look at the Bible very carefully, there's no such thing as integration in the Bible. There's reconciliation.
Reconciliation. That's a great place to stop. We need to go away for just a minute, okay? But you stay with me. We will be right back in just a moment.